Let's call the meeting to order, and let me welcome everybody. We're doing a Ring teleconferencing Ring Central meeting, and I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we can begin with a roll call. I'll ask Claudia to please conduct that of all the board members.
Gladly. Good afternoon, everybody. Can't believe we are in November already, but good afternoon. President Atwater.
Present.
Director Millibar.
Present.
Director Stamera.
Yes, good afternoon.
Director Palmer.
Here.
Director Martin.
Present.
Director Chang.
Here.
And Director Anapdawi.
Here.
Excellent. We have a quorum.
Great. Let's move on to agenda item 3, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. And please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So there's a challenge to do those on these calls. Claudia, we're going to agenda item 4. Do we have any public comments at this time?
So President Atwater, at this time, I have not received any public comment requests for this item, or
Great.
any, as a matter of fact.
Before we begin, I would like to provide an overview of the public comment process. Please note that we have modified this process to ensure compliance with AB 361. If someone would wish to provide a live public comment, we recommend that you submit a request through the link to the online request from noted on the agenda. Please make sure you submit the form by 2:15 p.m. In addition, anyone wishing to provide public comment during the meeting can do so by raising their hand function on the Ring Central platform. Those participating by phone can press *9 to raise their hand. With that, I'd also just ask if any board member wants to make a motion, we might want to try using the raised hand feature, or if you're really desperate, you can wave your hand like that, and I'll be happy to call on you to make a motion or second, or if you have a question. Thank you. Now let's move on to agenda item 5, and that would be the approval of the minutes of September 16th, 2021 of our regular scheduled board meeting last month, or 2 months ago, excuse me.
I move we approve.
Great,
Second.
excellent. We have a motion and a second. Claudia, please call the roll of the board.
President Atwater.
Yes?
Director Millibar.
Yes.
Director Stamera.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Yes.
Director Martin.
Yes.
Director Chang.
Yes.
And Director Anapdawi.
Yes.
Excellent. The meeting minutes have been approved.
Great. We'll move on to agenda item 6, the consent calendar. We have 6A, which we discussed before, and that is we need to approve every month a resolution consistent with AB 361 so that we can continue to have these remote meetings.
Okay. I move we approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Go ahead, Claudia, and we'll call the roll.
President Atwater.
Yes?
Director Millibar.
Yes.
Director Stamera.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Yes.
Director Martin.
Yes.
Director Chang.
Yes.
And Director Anapdawi.
Yes.
All
Consent
right.
calendar item approved.
Excellent. We'll go to agenda item 7. 7A is the DCA FY 2020-21 Audit Report.
Yes, I'll start out. President Atwater, good afternoon, directors. The DCA auditors have completed their draft fiscal year 2021 financial audit. We have with us today Brianne Weiss from KPMG here to walk us through the presentation of the draft findings. Brianne?
Thank you so much. I'm trying to start my video. We'll see if I'm successful with it. What I'm going to do today is walk through a real brief presentation that summarizes both the scope, timing, and results of our audit of the DCA. So moving on to the next screen, this is just an introductory screen of who's with you today. Unfortunately, Lizelle had a family emergency and it's unfortunately not able to make it, but I am here with you as your lead engagement managing director, and Lizelle was the lead engagement senior manager on the audit this year. The next slide discusses high level the scope of the audit and the timing. As you know, we were engaged to perform an audit of the DCA for fiscal year ended June 30, 2021, and those financial statements are prepared on the cash receipts and disbursements basis of accounting, which really just represents, as you can imagine, cash receipts and disbursements. There's no balance sheet as you might expect to see in some other full accrual financial statements. But the cash basis is another comprehensive basis of accounting. Our audit fieldwork was primarily conducted during August and September of 2021 with the assistance of some internal staff, or internal audit department, I should say, of MWD. And the supplemental information included in the financial statements is unaudited and included for additional information just to make sure that we understand that scope. Next, probably skip 2 slides. These are our required communications. I like to call this my no matters to report slide, which is really a good thing. These are all of our required communications per the auditing standards, and no matters to communicate, no matters to report means that everything is good, that there was nothing that was identified during the course of the audit. We are planning to issue an unmodified opinion on the auditor's report, which is, you know, a clean opinion for all intents and purposes. Last year, there was a going concern paragraph that was added to the report, just given the uncertainty around future funding that was going to the state water contractors' approval of their respective board, I think in late calendar 2020 and early calendar 2021. That has since happened, and there is no matter to report here with that for your June 30, 20 financial statements. And then the next slide here, a continuation of my no matters to report slide here. Again, these are just the required communications. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them because I would only do that if there was something to report to you. We do have written communications, which are our engagement letter and management representation letters. Both of them were what I would call standard. Very little difference from what we've done in the past and have been previously communicated. And our very last slide is some inquiries that we typically make of you, of the board. Now, we didn't necessarily contact the board and have these discussions, but we did contact and have discussions with many people that sit at all these board meetings. So that is how we got comfortable with these, but certainly if anything sparks anybody's interest here or has anything to say, we'd be happy to hear it. And ultimately, that concludes my presentation. Very boring, which I think is ultimately the sign of a very clean audit.
Well, thank you very much, Brianne, and we appreciate your concise but very complete annual audit report. I see a raised hand by Director Anand Onadabi. Are you having a question, or just leave your hand up?
That may have been accidental. I'm gonna.
Okay, great. Do we have any questions from the members of the board? I don't see any hands raised. Then I would, this is just recommended for information only now, so there's no action required, right?
That's correct, President Atwater. It just needs to be presented to the board.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on then to 7B, the November DCA monthly report. Again, this is an information item too, and I think Graham would like to kick this off.
I will. Thank you, President Atwater and members of the board. So we'll start out the monthly report. Claudia, if we could go to section 1. Let's start there. So as typical, I will just highlight a few items that I think are of interest. And then of course, if there's any specific questions, please let me know and we can pause or go back at any point. Under the program management item, I did want to point out that we're getting very close to closing out fiscal year 2021. I'm sure this board recalls we did extend the task order of one of our contractors to the end of September so that it would align with the expiration of their contract rather than issuing a very short duration task order. And so as a result, that did delay a little bit our ability to close out FY 2021, but we're pretty much there, and I expect by the time we meet again in January, we will have everything buttoned up and we'll be actually coming back to this board also with a resolution to move over any remaining funds from FY 2021 over to the current fiscal year. Just as a preview, it's looking like the underrun that we are going to have from FY 2021 is somewhere between $900,000 and $1 million, just to give folks a frame of reference. So as we did back in July to roll over a chunk of the underrun, we would propose to do the same thing again in January to fully clean up the books for FY 2021. Another item listed under administration, under the administration section near the bottom there, I just wanted to highlight that we're continuing to make progress on the boardroom hybrid meeting project. And so that is to convert our boardroom for this DCA board over to a completely functional hybrid workspace. And so we're still crossing our fingers, hoping that we'll have that all in place and ready for the January board meeting. As you can imagine, there are some supply chain issues, as is just about everywhere right now. There are supply chain challenges, but we have been doing our best to keep that project moving forward and making adjustments in materials based on availability and delivery timing so that we can really try and keep this project moving and hopefully have it in place. So we will keep you updated, but that is the intention. On the engineering front, we continue to support DWR and the environmental team as there are requests for information or clarification coming from the environmental team. And then we're also working on a new baseline version of the engineering project report, which includes all of the associated technical memoranda and conceptual design sheets, all that are used as the basis for the impact analyses. And then lastly, on the fieldwork front, we are continuing our efforts to collect and evaluate subsurface conditions delta-wide so that we can continue to validate parameters assumed in the development of the conceptual designs. We are just about to complete our relatively small field program that we conducted this fall, but wet conditions after the storm a couple of weeks ago have prevented the completion of the last boring. It's in a really wet area. And so we're at this point kind of waiting it out and also considering other options to finish that last location. But generally we got all the work done that we wanted to do this fall. Any questions on section 1 before I move on to the next item? Okay, so Claudia, let's go to section 3 budget, and the first table there at section 3 would be fine. We have a current budget of $23.5 million, as is shown on the table. I mentioned we're almost done with our closeout, and we're likely to have a number somewhere around $1 million to roll over, and we'll bring that to you in January once we have the exact figures all calculated. In terms of the current budget, we've committed just over 17 million and incurred about 4.3 million to date. Claudia, any questions here, board, before I move on? I was going to jump to one more item in the summary. Okay, so Claudia, if we could go to section 4 contracts. And the point I want to make here, it's in the note at the top, but then it's also highlighted in table 6. So you might navigate there, Claudia, while I get started. We are in the process of procuring a new geotechnical contract to continue providing subsurface data collection and testing and reporting services to the DCA for the duration of planning. We released that RFQ on October 1st, and we're now in the process of reviewing received SOQs. If everything goes according to plan, we should be bringing a recommendation to this board in January. I see a question from Director Palmer.
How many SOQs have we had from this one so far?
So we received 3 SOQs.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Next item, Claudia, I wanted to go to schedule, section 5, please. And this is very quick, just to say that at this point we're on track. We have no issues or red flags popping up from a schedule perspective. So that completes the sort of my quick review through the monthly report. But of course, if there's any items that the directors would like to pull back on and go through, be happy to do that.
Well, thank you, Graham. Excellent presentation. I don't see any hands raised either. So I guess we can move on to 7C, and that's approval of the second amendment to the Management Partners Agreement for Executive Director Services. And Josh, I assume you're going to introduce that.
Yes, President Atwater, thank you. So the item before you is a second amendment to the Management Partners Agreement. This amendment makes two relatively minor changes to that agreement. The first is it extends the notice provision for the DCA to terminate the contract from the current 60 days up to 90 days. In addition, the agreement currently requires DCA approval for any change in key personnel, like Mr. Bradner. This amendment would keep that requirement, but would add a new notice provision requiring management partners to provide at least 60 days notice to the DCA of any proposed changes in key personnel, which again would still be subject to our approval. I did not include a red line in the packet given the relatively brief nature of the amendment, but the edits and changes are shown in underline in the attachment. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Any questions from members of the board? I don't see any hands raised. I would entertain a motion to approve this.
Ready to make a motion?
Second.
Yes. Yep. Thank you both. Claudia, you want to go ahead and call the roll of the board?
President Atwater,
Yes.
Director Millibar,
Yes.
Director Sturmera,
Aye.
Director Palmer,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
Director Chang,
Yes.
Director Anaptawi.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. We'll move on to 7D. And this is a senior leadership spotlight, Ruth Douzinas, who I just met before the meeting started, and we welcome her. And I don't know if Graham or somebody wants to introduce her, and look forward to hearing from her.
I will say just a word to introduce Ruth, President Atwater. We have for you today Ruth Douzinas. This is she is the DCA's Program Controls Manager. Ruth manages a team of folks behind the scenes, but this seemed like good timing for you to meet her as we're talking about all these financial discussions, closeout budgets, etc. So with that, I'm very happy to introduce Ruth. Ruth, you are ready to go.
Great, thank you, Graham. Hello, everyone. So I think what I'll do is just go through my background and what I've done to date before DCA, and then I'll talk about my role at DCA. So a little bit about me. I went to Dartmouth College in New Hampshire and received a degree in environmental biology. And I then took a little bit more of a turn towards the technical. After working out of school, I realized that engineers were the ones that got to make the decisions. And so I followed up my undergraduate degree with a master's from Stanford in environmental engineering. And I then stayed on the West Coast. Claudia, if you could switch to the next slide. I worked for a firm that doesn't exist anymore, CH2M Hill. They are now part of Jacobs Engineering, I believe. But I worked there for 14 years. I started as a junior engineer doing water and wastewater condition assessments. I worked on pilot plants for what was supposed to be Enron's cooling water, to receive water out of a wastewater treatment plant and reuse it in cooling towers. I worked in Marin County what I ended up doing for the majority of my tenure at CH was working on military bases. Which is the Military Training Center in Barstow, California. Amble, Kentucky, which is the home of the 101st Airborne. The military underwent improvement to the quality of living for the troops. And as part of that, they got out of the business of running towns, which are essentially what military bases are. I became the town manager for the water and wastewater utilities. I was the deputy program manager. We operated the facilities and designed and implemented improvements to all of those facilities. So it was a very interesting part of my career, and it really turned me on to public service and how much more meaningful work was when you were doing it directly. So as a result of that, I went to work for New York City. That was what led me to move over into public service. I worked for the Department of Environmental Protection in the Bureau of Engineering, Design, and Construction, where we had a huge capital plan. At Fort Irwin, the capital plan was $60 million. At New York City, our capital plan was upwards of $10 billion. And I was part of the senior management team there. I was the program controls director. I oversaw cost estimating, scheduling, permitting, the implementation of a cost control system, the specification section, all of the different support services that provided specialty services and the actual projects. I stayed with New York City for over 3 years, and then I went on to start my own company, which is called Trireme Consulting. The first project I did for Trireme was to go to work for Bloomberg. They have a massive construction. They have about 150 offices worldwide. I can't say much except for the headline to the right. They had some issues with fraud, and they wanted to implement a structured delivery system for projects. And I did that for them. I led the effort. It's actually the same system that DCA is using, eBuilder, to create a structured delivery program for their projects. And so that was very interesting. It was interesting to work for the private sector, but it reaffirmed my belief that those of us that get to work for the public sector, it's much more meaningful. And so that's how I ended up back here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your presentation, Ruth. I hope I can call you Ruth. And I really impressed with your professional credentials and experience. And how long have you been working at DCA then?
So I've been here, I believe it's about 1.5 years. And so I oversee program controls here, much like what I did at New York City on a smaller scale. And we have a team of cost management. We do document control. And we have the cost control system, and we're operating that now.
Excellent. Any other questions?
We've built a system.
Yeah.
Systems or anything from my background?
Well, I'll just say that President Atwater, if I could please, that Ruth really has been instrumental in establishing a lot of the workflows and processes that we live by here at the DCA. And so I think this is a great opportunity to meet Ruth and hear about her very impressive background. So Anyway, I'll stop there and see if any of the other board members have questions, but I just wanted to add that, Ruth, to appreciate your contributions to the DCA, and I know you're sort of in a remote location right now, so I really appreciate you joining us here too.
Mhm.
Yes, I see Director Sarah Palmer's raised her hand.
I just wanted to say, Ruth, that this, I'm so glad to see your credentials and get to see who you are a little bit, like to get to know you better. But it's just another example of the quality of people that we've got working within this group. I mean, the DCA has got the most impressive folks working for it, and so I'm just so glad that you're part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure working with this group.
And Director Robert Cheng, you have a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say impressive credentials, and very happy that you're helping out with this effort, and welcome aboard. Looking forward to working with you.
Excellent. And Director Gary Martin, you have something you want to ask Ruth about?
Yeah, thank you, President Atwater. And Ruth, thank you very much for your presentation. We are obviously in good hands with regard to program controls. Welcome aboard. And anybody who's spent time up at Fort Irwin, right outside of Director Anatoli's backyard up there. So welcome you to the team. I'm glad you've been with us for a year and a half, and look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I'll just say again, on behalf of all the board, we appreciate your being on the team, and we look forward to continuing to hear from you in the future.
President Atwater, I think Director Anabdawi had a comment.
Oh, great.
My hand raise isn't as effective. Thank you. I just wanted to say I really do appreciate this series of highlighting just the fantastic team the DCA has, and project controls are extremely important on a project this complex, and so really glad to have Ruth's super qualified expertise here behind us as we move forward. So thanks, and look forward to hearing more from you.
And not only that, it looks like she's a dog lover, so yes.
I see Director Esther Merritt, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, from another dog lover. Welcome.
Oh, we all love dogs.
Working with you. Great.
Excellent.
Well, it looks like Director Martin had Millibar also had a comment.
I just would like to echo everything that the others have said, and it's extremely important to us to have your kind of qualifications helping lead this project so that it'll be an efficient and cost-effective effort. And as the others have said, we're very happy to have you as part of our team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else has any other additional comments. I don't see any. We can move on to agenda item 7E, and that's a update on the Stakeholder Engagement Committee.
Yeah, thanks so much. Hello, how are you all? I'll start that off. I'm going to hand it over to Graham very shortly, but usually the meetings I give a bit of an overview on the last SEC meeting, and I wanted to talk about our meeting in September because it was, to be perfectly frank, a really rough one and a really contentious one. Usually there's a balance to be had on what we discuss, and I think September's meeting, people would agree on the SEC and on the staff side, did not feel very productive. And I think part of that for us is that, ever since last spring when the majority of our work was handed over to DWR, our agenda items have been less DCA related work and more sort of bringing in other subjects, either at the request of SEC members or daylighting other information, which I think has been really valuable for the SEC to be able to daylight DWR's information and have Carrie speak or others. But I think what happened in September kind of showed us that the further we stray from DCA's core competency, which was to get engineering and design feedback from the community on the work that we do, the less productive our meetings have become. You know, I've noticed that this is really hard. I think that you have sort of two sides, and this is not just the SEC. This could be, it's a larger discussion in the world apparently, but even if you're surrounded by experts on a topic, when they tell you you're wrong, I think that's really hard to hear and not very effective. And on the other side, when we have experts sort of put in their opinions and present their information, and you have folks who kind of have their lived experience and don't agree, then the experts sort of feel somewhat offended. And I think that it's what we've ended up with is most of our information is in the hands of the DWR. As per the very sort of start of the SEC, we're kind of reaching the end point where our work is finished and we're heading into the early next year into sort of CEQA and the draft DIR release. And I think it's time to think about sunsetting the SEC. I'll let Graham talk about that more and I'll hand that off to him. But I do want to say that not only is this timely based on sort of the history of the start of the SEC and what we sort of sectioned out for the start and the end date, but I really also think that what happened in September kind of really emphasizes that point. We had 1 or 2 resignations before the meeting. We had a resignation during the meeting. And I think and we've had a resignation this week as well. So in light of all that, I wanted to hand it over to Graham to talk about the sort of the future of the SEC and give everyone an update. Happy to answer anything now or at the end as well.
Great. Thank you, Nasli. Did any directors have questions for Nasli before? I'm going to go through a bit of detail going back to sort of the beginning and standing up of the SEC and then kind of bringing us full circle to where we are now. But I can pause just for a second while we have Nasli here to see if anyone has any specific questions for Nasli.
I have a comment.
Vice President Palmer.
Please.
Yes, and Nasli, I wanted you to take this. I know that there were many negative things going on at the meeting, but there were also a couple positive, and I just wanted to let you know that I had feedback from some of the folks that were feeling very, contentious or negative at the time, and what they had said was that they actually truly appreciated the DCA folks and thought that they had been treated with respect and that they had been listened to, and that they were very glad to have worked with, not with us per se in collaboration. There's no way, but basically having been part of it in dealing with the DCA folks. So I did want you to know that even if there was some angst going on there, I had some quite positive feedback about, say, you and Graham and Phil and working with me and Barbara, and so they have that positivity. So please at least take that and know.
I really appreciate you saying that. And listen, none of this is personal. People are really passionate about where they live. They've got a lot of opinions about the project, a lot of concerns, and that's very valid. I think the hard part for us is, we've had this group of people who have been so engaged for so many months. The meetings are dense, the information is dense, and everyone's done an incredible job. I'm really grateful to the Stakeholder Engagement Committee for showing up. And I touched base with each person who was willing to speak with me afterwards about sort of if they wanted to sort of communicate anything with me about the end of the SEC. And what most of them said was, our issues are not with the DCA's work at this point. I think people have concerns that are very much in CEQA territory and very much sort of operational. And that's where I'm saying I think it's becoming less effective. I think there's nothing worse than kind of sitting in a room and kind of it's a mismatch, right? The issues that people are concerned with are outside the scope of the DCA. It doesn't mean their concerns aren't valid, their points aren't valid, or that they should be considered. It's just that we sort of have our hands tied, and that's really dissatisfying for both sides. You know, when it comes to siting a facility or construction effects, like, then we can talk. But again, as we move further and further away from DCA's work and into kind of operational and CEQA and draft DIR, the issues that folks from the SEC are bringing up to us are not ones the DCA can solve or can sort of discuss. But I'm grateful for that. And again, I'm really grateful for both you and Barbara, and especially the SEC. I've had really lovely discussions, and I have really nice relationships. You know, people are professionals, and I'm grateful for it. So yeah, it's nothing personal. I think it's just about how to be effective and how to think about how to use our best resources to remain effective.
I think you're right about that. It really wasn't personal. It was really just that what they feel passionate about in their homes. And there may be a time when we need another stakeholders engagement as the DCA ramps up and starts actually doing things that are DCA related again. So, but yeah, I just, it's been a really impressive group of people, and the folks, I think, with the DCA who've been working with this have been, again, as you mentioned, very professional, and it's been a pleasure working with them.
Thanks, Sarah.
So I think President Atwater, if it's okay with you, I can't see if there's others who have wanted to speak now, but I can go through the content, and then of course we could have more discussion at the end. And I think, so if it's all right, I think I'll just go ahead and try and get through the material. Is that okay?
Sure. I did note Director Estromero does have his hand raised.
Well, absolutely. Then I don't want to cut anybody short. I just don't want to force you. Once we cover everything, then I'm going to drag you through a presentation.
Okay. Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a few comments. I could make some after Graham, but I did, before Nasli left, I wanted to express my appreciation for the work that her and staff did with the committee. I was particularly proud that they were very transparent, clearly always never held back, always shared every fact with everyone, answered every question. And you know, it's just a lot of pride to see public officials act that way. You know, very transparent, hide nothing, share everything, answer every question, not run away from anything. I just think that staff did a fantastic job. Number one, and you're more than to be complimented for it. So thank you, Nasli. And certainly the rest of your staff for the work that you've been doing. I know it takes a lot of work. You put in an awful lot of hours, but especially it was the attitude that you all brought to the task. And I know that the public that saw how you handled it also appreciated it. It's not stuff we see every day, especially in that stupid Congress that we have. But to have public officials act this way so transparently, I think is an example of what we expect from public officials. So thank you again. You set a fantastic standard for all of us in public office to follow. So thanks again.
That's very kind.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, we all appreciate and echo your comments.
Thank you, Director Estromero.
Yeah. Alternate Director Barbara Keegan, you have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you very much. I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a bad cold. I wanted to echo the comments that everyone else has said, and the team has done a wonderful job. But first and foremost, I really want to thank the SEC members who participated in a process that was at times very painful for them. And as Director Palmer alluded to, and as Nasli also alluded to, this project will be built, you know, in people's neighborhoods, in their homes, and there's just a great deal of sensitivity. But I think everyone was their highest selves in terms of how they moved through this process. So just as staff was professional and, you know, kept their cool, even when things from time to time got a little tense. The community members were great too, and it really has been really kind of a once in a lifetime experience to have participated and helped facilitate something like this. I just would add, and maybe Graham might be going to add this as well, because we're moving into the environmental process and the SEC has been a Brown Act committee. This is actually going to give those community members more flexibility to be able to communicate with each other, to respond to issues that come up, and allow them to fully advocate for their communities during the environmental review process. So I think that there's some real benefits to the community from that perspective. And I'll conclude my comments now. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Those are very nice comments, and I can't see everyone. Claudia, are there any other hands raised before I?
No, I think we can proceed with the presentation, Graham.
Okay.
Unless
yeah.
unless President Atwater.
No, I don't. I just, as always, something like this, I got an outside call on my landline, so I just had to hang up.
Well, I think those are extremely valuable comments by the board members, so I very much appreciate the input and thoughts there. Thank you very much, Nasli, for introducing the topic. And so now we're going to go through a series of slides that I think will take us sort of full circle. So next slide, please, Claudia. Let's start with just a quick reminder of the original purpose of the Stakeholder Engagement Committee. So when we were tasked by DWR to develop preliminary engineering and design considerations for the proposed Delta Conveyance project, we saw an opportunity to give feedback from stakeholders in the Delta, with most of the emphasis on placing and siting of facilities, understanding potential traffic and waterway effects, reducing construction-related impacts, and land use effects. So the SEC was not mandated or required, right? This was a DCA board decision to stand up this committee so that the project being evaluated in the EIR would reflect some amount of community input. It was also decided that the SEC should be a Brown Act body. So this was to ensure a maximum amount of transparency in the process. And I'm sure you all recall the nature of these meetings, whether in person or virtual, also meant that the SEC and the public at large had access to a tremendous amount of materials, design schematics, maps that the DCA provided in order to daylight our engineering and design concepts, even early concepts and iterations that evolved over time. So all of those materials remain available through our website, and printed materials are available throughout the Delta at local libraries. So on this slide, the table summarizes all of the board actions that were taken regarding the SEC. Beginning in September of 2019, the DCA board passed a resolution to form the ad hoc committee. Then in a series of actions, DCA board expanded membership of the committee. And so this was based on gaps identified during discussions at SEC meetings, identification of maybe stakeholders that were not well represented, or different efforts to diversify the membership of the Stakeholder Engagement Committee. So it's always been a priority for the DCA board to be responsive to that and continue to expand access to the Stakeholder Engagement Committee. But then more recently, in May of this year, the board reduced the size of the SEC. We had a couple of folks step down after we completed most of the conceptual design effort, and we were starting to have challenges maintaining a quorum. I believe it was our June meeting, or no, it was the April meeting. We almost didn't have the quorum that we need to continue with the meeting, and so we had to have a board action to modify the size of the committee. Next slide, please. So the SEC consisted of a maximum of 20 members, and then there were 2 DCA board representatives, Chair Sarah Palmer and Vice Chair Barbara Keegan. The members of the SEC, that is, represent a wide array of interests and geographic locations within the Delta. We had folks from Sacramento County, Yolo, San Joaquin, Contra Costa, representatives from tribal governments. We had folks representing recreation, public safety, local businesses within the Delta and other community entities, agriculture, Delta heritage, fish and wildlife, as well as local water agencies. And to be clear, I mean, I think this has already probably been stated, but to be explicit about it, These are not folks who support the project, but these are folks who live and work in the Delta and were willing to participate in this body for all the reasons we discussed on the previous slide. In total, we had 19 meetings. These are 3 to 4 hour long committee meetings held over the last 2 years. That includes the upcoming meeting that we're planning in December. And at those meetings, we had over 65 agendized and prepared presentations that were provided by the DCA or DWR. So next slide, Claudia, please. So we begin our work with the SEC by providing an introduction to the system and then a detailed review of key project elements such as the intakes, tunnels and shafts, facilities in the South Delta, and then more recently the Bethany complex. We reviewed siting alternative studies for all these facilities, including review of siting factors, the scoring approach and rationale, the resulting ranking of various potential sites. So as the proposed alignment started taking shape, we then reviewed the construction footprints and the logistics and traffic plans that would be needed to support those facilities. Then lastly, as we made adjustments, it was very much an iterative process. As we made those adjustments to the conceptual designs, we brought those back to the SEC to show them how their input was being incorporated into the conceptual designs or how those conceptual designs were evolving over time. Next slide, please. So as you can imagine, there were a lot of concerns expressed about the project. SEC members had a lot of concerns about conditions in the Delta, which in some cases did translate to substantial changes in the conceptual design. I've got a list on the left side of this slide. This is just a short list. We have a much longer complete list, but these examples are design adjustments that have been included in the conceptual designs. And so the list just begins with a pretty significant effort to evaluate opportunities and methods for reclaiming agricultural land impacted by construction, and then also to think hard about the layout of each site, trying to minimize the overall footprint to begin with. Also, we shifted facilities away from natural areas, and so that included facilities initially sited within or very close to the Stone Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, and then also in between elements of the Woodbridge Ecological Reserve. We, over time, eliminated most of the barging and associated effects to really limit the impacts on recreational boating. We added, on the logistics side of things, we added rail. We looked at the most logical solutions for expanding of roads or even eliminating structures to maintain acceptable levels of service. A couple examples of that is we reconfigured a lot down on the South Delta and around the Southern Complex to really try and minimize the impacts to Highway 4, which would have required bridge replacements on Victoria Island and placement of shafts closer to Discovery Bay than they currently are. All that took a lot of time and work and iteration to land on what we feel like is the best solution. We reduced borrow and import requirements to reduce traffic loads. That was a pretty extensive effort to look at program-wide soil balance to make sure that we were making most use of all the materials that we would be generating through excavation activities or tunneling operations, and try and offset the fill requirements required at those sites or other sites and sequence things so that the fill being generated could also be utilized for fill elsewhere. So it was a pretty lengthy exercise to try and figure out how best to sequence all of those work activities across the program and minimize those import requirements. All of that trying to reduce traffic loads on the roads. We also did a study on tunnel conditioners and have been able to identify that there's been a lot of recent development in eco-friendly tunneling conditioners, and intend to specify that eco-friendly type conditioners or eco-friendly conditioners would be required by eventual tunneling contractors. And then looking specifically at the intakes, we again took a whole fresh look at the intakes and were able to come up with a new configuration for the temporary cofferdam that significantly reduced the pile driving impacts that would be required to construct those temporary structures. So again, that's just a short list, and there's a whole lot more back there, but I felt like it was worth taking a moment here with the board to highlight some of these key adjustments that have been incorporated. Next slide, please. So as you heard mentioned earlier, the DCA has completed the conceptual designs for the central and eastern alignment, as well as the Bethany Reservoir alternative earlier in this year. But we've continued the SEC so that folks could see how the environmental impact analyses can drive changes in the design concepts. And we've brought back to the SEC iterations and haul routes and different things that we've been adjusting over the past several months. At this point, we're nearing the end of the current phase, and we're all sort of preparing to transition our efforts to supporting DWR as they prepare to release the public draft EIR. I think overall, the SEC provided an opportunity for a conceptual design team to hear directly from the community on their concerns. When those concerns were related to potential effects of project design or construction, then the designers had the chance to think about different approaches or solutions to try and reduce or help with those effects. Really back to Naslie's point earlier, when the concerns were related to Delta issues outside of the scope of DCA's work or within operation of the State Water Project, for instance, it wasn't really within our scope or of our team to respond. And this did lead at times to some frustration on both sides about, I think, the continued effectiveness of the SEC. It was always intended that the SEC would wind down after the conceptual designs were completed. I have an excerpt on the right. This is an image from an SEC meeting 1 year ago this month. So this was November of 2020. And it shows where my predecessor, Catherine Mallon, proposed to extend the SEC. So this was presented at an SEC meeting in November, proposed to extend the SEC to the end of 2021 based on the timeline for the Bethany Reservoir alternative, and also to tee up the transition for engagement over to release of the draft EIR. So by my view, we've reached that transition point. And so it's staff's intention for the upcoming December SEC meeting to be the last meeting. And we would bring a resolution to this board in January to sunset the SEC. Similar to I really appreciate the comments and thoughts at the beginning of this presentation. I really do want to acknowledge and appreciate the effort it took for the SEC members and the DCA board representatives to participate in the SEC meetings. Believe me, I have heard the term excruciating detail used several times with respect to DCA's content, and I can appreciate the amount of engineering content and information that was conveyed to that group. We really tried as much as possible to present complex engineering concepts as clearly and plainly as possible to the SEC, and they continuously challenged us to do better when it came to how we presented our information. So I would like to reiterate and acknowledge the dedication of the SEC taking in so much information and doing their best to share that information to their broader networks. In April of last year, we all had to make the pivot to virtual meetings at the beginning of the pandemic, much like the rest of the world. And while a few SEC members did voice their concerns over continuing their work, I appreciate the committee's commitment to the process and believe that we really did do our collective best given the circumstances. And I'll note that we actually had more overall public participation in the virtual format, but I'm sure, as we all know at this point, virtual format also has its pretty severe limitations. We do intend to memorialize the experience of the SEC in a white paper, focusing on lessons learned from the process, what worked, what didn't work. And also we know that the SEC has lived through a lot of design iterations, so we plan to spend some time at the December SEC meeting reviewing in a more comprehensive way how the designs have evolved, the motivations behind it, and the efforts that we've really taken to heart to minimize community effects. Next slide, please, Claudia. Now, this is absolutely not an end of outreach and engagement efforts in the near term, and the DCA is still wholly committed to transparency and accessibility of the information. So, but certainly if there is a project recommended and we begin down a path of detailed design, then there would be even more engagement with local communities to refine design plans and work through any concerns or issues. As part of our near-term efforts to ensure that the community has access to current engineering information about the conceptual project, we will continue to conduct our community engineering briefings as requested for local groups and residents to help them understand the current project. Also, as previously mentioned, we're working with 20 local libraries in and around the Delta to provide hard copies and thumb drives with all sorts of engineering related content available. And then we also recently updated our virtual tours, which are bird's eye flyovers of the proposed projects. These are accessible through our website, and they've been expanded now to include additional languages of Spanish and Mandarin, again, with the focus of trying to improve accessibility and expand our outreach of current information. We will continue to think about new and different ways to get out and connect with the community and continue on this mission of ensuring that we're making sure that the most recent and accurate information is available to the public. But lastly, as I mentioned before, We will also be making the bigger shift to supporting DWR's planned outreach efforts for 2022. And so with that, I will hand it over to Carrie to speak further on that last point.
Thanks, Graham. Before I launch into the plan for next year, I wanted to mention how thankful I've been to be able to participate in the SEC meetings. I've really appreciated the committee members' time and energy and passion that they put into this. And the slide at least disappeared from my computer. I was going to start talking about that, but Claudia, are they coming back?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, I guess it's just been an incredibly valuable process to me to be able to participate and listen to the feedback from the community. So next year on the DWR side, we're really going to be very focused on release of the draft EIR, which in many ways necessitates a more formal outreach process because we need to be able to formally accept comment and respond to those comments. So we have sort of three prongs in what we're planning for next year. The first is public information. We want to be able to have informational resources to help the public review, understand, and react to the draft EIR. And that could include a variety of things. We're thinking about videos that have some of the key information that might help people, website updates, fact sheets, graphics. We're also going to be planning public outreach and engagement. And the idea here is to try to engage people in the process, really pull them in and make sure that they know about the draft EIR and encourage them to review it. So it's really proactive outreach. And so we will encourage people to participate through emails, phone calls, meetings, briefings, etc. And then the last piece here is the public participation and notification. And this is sort of that formal process that we need to be able to provide meaningful opportunities to access public review documents and respond through formal public input processes. So we'll have workshops, publicity, flyers, materials in libraries, translated materials. This is the chance for people to publicly and formally comment on the document in a way that we will respond to and address within the final EIR. So I think, Graham, back to you.
Thank you, Carrie. Well, that's it. Board, that's what we wanted to share on the subject. And so I think if there's other questions or comments, I would be happy to take them.
Great. I see Director Robert Cheng has his hand raised.
Sorry, President Atwater. Appreciate the the opportunity to comment. So Graham, first of all, thank you very much for that comprehensive overview of where the SEC has come from and the great progress it's made. I think when I first got on board a little less than a year ago, I really didn't know all the different workings of the SEC and the importance. And I think through time, I think you've educated me on the importance of this, and also the stakeholders. I think as you highlighted, I think the SEC was designed for a specific purpose to get input on the design. And I think it feels like we've done a lot of that, a lot of good work. So it does sound like it's a natural transition time to finish out those discussions. I think it sounds like the public will still have an opportunity to engage, perhaps through a different forum. So I just want to give a big thanks to Nasli and Carrie and the DCA board members, and certainly Graham, for your time of leading what I think is what I've learned to be a very important effort. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Great. Director Martin.
Thank you, President Atwater. I'd be very hard pressed to improve on what Director Estramero said earlier about Nasli's effort and Sarah and Barbara and the whole SEC team. But I would like to point out that with Graham's presentation, it really emphasized the level of effort that was put out by the entire DCA team in meeting with these people. And boy, that was a heavy lift for sure, to go into this area where it's going to be hard pressed to find people who are enthusiastic about this project. But the best we can do as public servants is to treat people with respect and appreciate their involvement, and just act like the professionals that we are. And I'm proud of our team, and I thank you for your efforts.
Yeah, I think everybody on the board agrees with that. Director Palmer.
Yes, I just wanted to say a couple of different things, and that I wanted to acknowledge that Catherine Mallon really had the vision for this in terms of setting this up, and she really saw it through its early and sometimes painful stages, and I wanted to basically set out my my great appreciation for her vision on that. And also, I wanted to acknowledge that Carrie Buckman has really held up the environmental aspects of the DWR admirably, and she was at just about every single meeting and answered questions in calm, professional manner, of course. And so those are just a couple of other acknowledgments I wanted to make sure we highlighted.
Great, thank you for that. Director Estermeyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to complete my comments from earlier that with respect to both the committee and the community, I wanted to, of course, express my appreciation and acknowledgement of our chair of the committee, Director Palmer, and also, of course, the vice chair, our own, Director Keegan. They, performed exceptionally, of course, as public officials, once again, setting the standard. And wanted to thank the members of the committee for doing what they did, which was tremendous participation on behalf of their community. But most importantly, I wanted to assure both those members of the committee and also the community that they were representing and that they continue to represent, that we will always be committed to making sure that they get to participate extensively, especially when it comes to the public benefits of the project. I think it's important for you to understand that we are absolutely continuing to be committed to being sensitive to the needs of the community that's affected with our project, and that we will ensure that you're always involved in what we do and how we do it in our construction and so on, and in all of our activities in your community. It's the least that public officials ought to be doing, is to always think about what goes on in the community, especially the folks that are affected with their projects. This is a project that is going to benefit all of our state, everywhere in our state, and it will affect folks in the local community. And so it's important for us. We owe you tremendously the right to participate extensively and to ultimately help us decide how we construct this project in your community. I think it's important for you to know that we will continue to express our commitment to make sure that you will participate in a very important way.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all those comments. Anand, did I see you waving? Did you want to make a comment?
It's thank you, Director, President Atwater. It's hard to top these comments of praise. I mean, I just want to echo them and say it's been phenomenal to see this get executed. Graham showed a list of examples of things that had changed or been implemented due to this process. I think that's a real good sort of proof that this was a successful endeavor and worth everyone's time. And I think the DCA got out a lot from that program. So just wanted to thank everyone involved. I think it was, we've demonstrated it was very successful. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And I think we all, I just echo all of the board members who've spoken and those that have not. We all very much appreciate very much the work of Carrie Buckman, Nasli, our directors. I've listened to some of the SEC meetings from afar with the calling in and listening, but I really, it's been a lot of work and a lot of outreach. I don't see any other hands raised unless somebody else would like to make a comment. Claudia?
President Atwater, yeah, I would just like to say that, Sarah, thank you for your comments on Catherine. I will make sure that I let her know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good suggestion.
Thank you, Director Palmer. That's absolutely recognition of Catherine and Carrie. Absolutely. Thank you.
Good. Well, I think we're probably ready to move on. We'll go to agenda item 8 now. And
just given the public interest in this item, Claudia, can you confirm we didn't receive any requests for public
yeah,
comment?
I was going to ask that question. Yeah. Do we have any public comments on this
President
item?
Atwater, at this time, we have not received any public comment requests for any of the items on the agenda today.
Great. That's what I thought, because you would have told me if we had. Let's move on to 8A, and Josh, now you can talk about your report.
Thank you. So my report is in the packet. I wanted to highlight one issue, and that's the AB 361 that this board, the findings the board approved on the consent calendar. So as discussed in the report and actually in the staff report as well for that item, now that we've made those findings at our first remote meeting under AB 361, the statute requires us to extend those findings once every 30-day period to keep that on target. Because we meet once every other month, that won't allow us to do that at our regular meetings. And so I know Claudia will be reaching out to everyone to schedule special meetings as appropriate to make sure that we don't let those findings lapse. We know everyone has very busy schedules, so we will try our best to do it at a time that's most convenient for everyone. And if for some reason not everyone can attend, we just need a quorum to make those findings. So thank you.
Yeah, I've have all personal experience at Metropolitan and in my member agency. We're all doing this 30-day notice calendar, so it's we're required to do it, so it's perfunctory, but it'll be just, I would assume, like a 15 or 20-minute meeting, unless we have a good reason, and obviously happy to have other agenda items if warranted. Great. We'll move on to 8B, Treasurer's Report.
Good afternoon, Director Atwater. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, very well.
Oh, good. Good. So we are reporting our cash every for 2-month period at a time because of our current schedule. So the last time we talked, I think we talked about August. So our September balances, we started with 1,943,223. And for the month of September and October, our total receipts exceeded up $2 million, about $2.4 million. And that represented money contributions from the DCO to pay bills of $1.882099, almost $1.9 million. And an additional money that we got in advance for $500,000. This advance is as you know, we had money of $800,000 from seed money. We had to return that seed money back to the members who paid for it. But we do have a few bills that we have to prepay, our leases, and just things that we can't wait to be reimbursed. So we talked to them and graciously agreed to advance $500K. So we do have that seed money to prepay some bills. So that's why that amount was a little high. So by the end of October 31st, we had about $1.3 million on hand. And in addition to that, we have the schedules for budget versus actuals, and all other schedules are also attached. So inclusive of that $500,000 advance, we do have a net position of $785,522 that we continue to monitor. So that's my report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer at this time.
Do any members of the board have any questions? Seeing none. Great. And I assume no public comment. So why don't we move on? 8C, and that would be Carrie Bucknam's Environmental Manager's Report.
Thanks, President Atwater. As I mentioned earlier, we really are working hard at preparing the draft environmental impact report, which is scheduled for release in mid-2022. Additionally, I did just want to flag some of the follow-up from some public meetings we've had. When I've been here in the past, we talked about a series of technical webinars that we conducted over the summer, and those meetings are now available online in both English and Spanish if people want to watch the videos. And last night we had a meeting on sharing information about case studies on other community benefits programs. And so we had 3 guest speakers. I thought they were incredibly informative, and that video will also be available online in English and Spanish in a few weeks. Thank you.
Yeah, your videos are excellent. And I watched a little bit last night, and in the past I've watched a variety of the videos that you've done. It's really a nice statement of how to conduct public processes, so anybody over a period of time can see all the aspects of the project and the planning and all the alternatives that are being examined. I like it.
Thank you.
Any questions of Carrie? Sounds like 2022 is going to be a big year for you.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, very good. We'll move on to 8D. Any verbal reports from the board or board members or any other managers on the DCA team?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Sure. Yeah, just 2 things. And the first one is that a top-line management consulting did an agency profile and featured our own Mr. Bradner. And it was a 9-page report, and he did a very nice job of summarizing the DCA. And this is top-line management consulting is a subscriber system. I just happen to know from her high school years for many decades the person who had set up Claire Singleton. But I will ask her, if you like, if I can make available to the board some of the, the summary that she wrote. It's a very nice summary, very nice interview, and Graham gave a nice summary of the project and answered some interesting questions, and so that was a good thing.
Please do, Sarah. Please, work with the staff, but distribute it to the board.
Yeah, I will see if I can. I will contact Ms. Singleton, and then I'll also, at that point, I will. If she says okay, then I'll send it off to Claudia and she can take care of that. Secondly, I just wanted to say I'm going to be giving another presentation. I gave a presentation to the Dublin Rotary Club on the DCA, and it was well received. And since then, I've had contact from the Diablo District Gardeners Association, and so they want me to give an update in February. So I know things are going to be changing and things are moving ahead. So Carrie, I'll probably be contacting you and Graham and folks to get some updates and improve my my presentation and make it relevant to the moment. So that's coming up.
Oh, that's very nice. Any other verbal reports from any of the members of the board? Seeing none, I'll go on to agenda item 9, future agenda items. Does anybody have a request for a future agenda item? By that, Claudia, we got to remind everybody when our next board meeting is going to be, besides the 30-day, 15-minute meeting, which you'll send out a notice of that. That won't take a lot of preparation. All right, well, we don't have any future requests for agenda items. We can adjourn then.
Oh, wait a minute, I missed what Claudia said was the date of the next meeting. Could she repeat that?
You looking it up? It's going to be in January?
No. Yeah, so the next meeting is set for January 20th of 2022. However, I will be surveying the board to ensure that
we can make it work.
that we schedule that special board meeting for to be in compliance with the AB 361.
Okay. Yeah, you'll want to schedule that so it works for everybody, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure it aligns, considering that, it's every 30 days versus, they're not accounting for the months that have 31 days. So.
Exactly. You got to count them. We'll be looking for that. That will be in December. Hopefully not on Christmas Eve. Yeah. Well, happy Thanksgiving to everybody on the team. Good meeting. And look forward to running into you at Aqua next week in Pasadena.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a lovely afternoon. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.